hidden from the eye, yet a part of every living thing, is in soil, in richness of its presence. So, to those gain their living from the soil by planting and reaping, by tending the flocks and herds, indicates this story of phosphorus. This is the pure element phosphorus. Hardly one person in a million has ever seen it, for it is so unstable that it rushes to combine with the oxygen in air, bursting into flame and smoke until it is consumed. Yet because it is so unstable and combines so readily with other elements, it is found in countless compounds, in one form or another, a part of every single cell of plant, animal, and man. In a very real sense, it is a key to life, for it is directly concerned with the process of cell division, which is life. There is much that is still unknown about this, but some things we do know. The basis of all growth, of plant, animal, or man, is the simple but mysterious process of dividing cells. With the aid of powerful microscopes, we can actually see living cells, even watch them as they pull themselves apart. Each half thus becomes a complete new cell and will grow. This process repeats itself millions of times. In this way, and in this way only, does any living thing, and nature has made provision for this need of you. She has packed a rich store of phosphorus in the seeds of plants, in eggs, in milk, everything that concerns the nourishment of a new generation. New growth, new life. There is another reason why phosphorus is especially needed in you. Phosphorus, calcium, and vitamin D from sunlight, these three work together in a strange partnership to build our bones, the framework of our bodies, and our teeth as well. That framework is finished by the time we are full grown. It must be built strongly while we are still young to last us well the rest of our lives. This phosphorus, without which we cannot even exist, must come to us from just one source, the soil which gives us all our food. No one can point to a grain of earth and say, this is phosphorus, yet it is there, hidden in its compounds. It must be there to become a part of the growing plant, a part of each ripe grain of wheat, finally, part of our daily bread. In pastures, sleek cattle devour lush, green grass, taking into their own bodies phosphorus from the soil. Part of the vital element goes into the building of healthy bone and muscle. Part goes into milk. Turned into the swift-moving channels of the milk industry, within a few short hours, its burden of life-giving elements is on your doorstep. The grasses of meadow and pasture land fatten beef cattle for market. The phosphorus and other elements taken from the soil by the grass and from the grass by the cattle become food for man. Sliced into thick, juicy steaks, the beef furnishes us with nourishment to rebuild our own tissues, balance the constant wear and tear of daily living. From the productive soil of this well-cared-for farm come potatoes, one of the best and cheapest sources of energy in our diet, and an inexpensive source of vitamins, too, when they are baked with their jackets on. Thus, in countless ways, does the cycle of life repeat itself. The soil feeds the plant feeds man. From that thin, tenuous covering of the earth, only a few inches thick, which we can till and cultivate, must come in one way or another all nourishment for mankind. From the orange juice at breakfast time to the dessert that tops off supper at the end of the day, every last bit of the food we live by comes from the soil. But there is another side to this story of the soil. For with every rich harvest taken out of the earth to feed the nation's millions, we also take some of the phosphorus and other minerals. The soil cannot continue forever to give up its minerals to us in the form of food, for not only do the growing plants constantly drain supply, if the soil is neglected, nature herself, by means of wind and weather, will tear it down still further and deplete it. The smallest particles of soil carry the greatest burden of minerals, and of course are the first to be blown away by the wind or washed away by the rain. Given a good start when the land is cleared and stripped for cultivation, then left to its own devices, the weather will remove all the fertile layer of topsoil from the ground, as it has done on this bare hilltop. When uncontrolled, heavy rains race down sloping fields, cutting their way through plants that are in the way. When man's neglect and nature's wear and tear have joined forces to drain the soil of its phosphorus, the land may become unable to support any but the most meager and unprofitable of crops. Although this run-down soil may look as good as any other, it has been depleted of this basic plant food and cannot be productive again until the loss is made up. How vitally important it is, then, that there should be a sure and dependable means of replacing the phosphorus so the soil may continue to yield in abundance to feed us and feed us well. While the soil's supply of phosphorus is easily used up, we have at hand the means to replace what we take away. Huge deposits of phosphorus are buried in the ground in various parts of the earth. In these great storehouses of fertility, the buried treasure is phosphate rock. These ordinary-looking pebbles, something more useful to man than gold, something that will become one of the raw materials of life itself. Let's take a good look at one of these natural phosphate rock deposits. In the town of Pierce in Florida are the mining headquarters of the American Agricultural Chemical Company, one of the world's largest producers of this basic raw material. Before the phosphate rock can be mined, prospecting crews probe the extent and depth of the deposits. Their drills bite through the overburden of earth, down through the layers of pebbles, all the way to bedrock, bringing up samples which are sent back to the laboratory at Pierce. After the rock is washed to separate the pebbles from the sand and clay, it is ground to a fine powder. Weighing out a portion of the powdered sample, the chemist begins his analysis to find out how much phosphorus is in the rock. The final answer is determined by color changes in the test solution, which enable him to compute just how rich in phosphorus the sample is. When it comes to actual mining, the first step is to uncover the phosphate beds. For this work, excavating machines called drag lines are brought into action. For all its great size and crushing weight, this modern mastodon goes about its work smoothly and quietly. When all is ready and the foreman says, "All right, let's go," the operator throws the switch and begins removing the accumulated dust of millions of years. How many million, nobody knows. Estimates run all the way from 5 to 15. In any case, the drag line bucket taking 17 tons at a bite makes short work of the intervening centuries. Looking down at the excavation gives a clearer idea of the size of the operation as the drag line lays bare a pit almost a city block in width. After the overburden has been removed, pipelines are laid in place to carry water to the pit, for it is with water that we shall do our mining. Water pumped from deep underground rivers and forced through the nozzles of the hydro units under heavy pressure. The water smashes down the banks of rock pebbles embedded in their matrix of clay and sand. Runs into the sump, whence it is pumped through pipelines cross-country to the washers. Arriving at the top of the washer, the phosphate rock travels down over vibrators and screens, which separate it from the sand and clay, wash it clean, and sort it for size. At the final screen, many a prehistoric shark's tooth or bit of fossilized bone bears mute testimony to the age of the deposits. Now thoroughly cleaned, the rock goes to bins from which it is loaded into railroad cars. From the washers, the wet rock is hauled over AAC's own railroad to the drying furnaces at Pierce. These electrically controlled oil-burning furnaces generate intense heat which drives off all moisture in the rock so it will be dry and uniform. Looking into the furnace, you can see how the pebbles are spilled through the flames time and time again. The dried phosphate rock pours out of a chute at the rear of the furnace and is carried up by elevator to this overhead conveyor on its way to the dry storage bins where it is held awaiting shipment. As the rock is loaded, samples are taken to recheck the phosphorus content of the shipment. Covered cars are used to keep all moisture from the rock while in transit. The destination of the train is Boca Grande on Florida's west coast. One of AAC's shipping points, it is provided with storage buildings and electrically operated loading piers for transferring the rock to ships. The ships which will carry it on its way to become a part of our daily lives in a multitude of ways, as we shall presently see. Some 1,800 miles by sea from Florida, we find our ship again, starting to unload its cargo of phosphate rock at one of the American Agricultural Chemical Company's factories. There are 33 AAC plants located for convenient service to agriculture and industry. Now, just by looking at this rock, you can't see the phosphorus which it contains, but it's there just the same. And the next thing we'll see is how it can be released from its stony prison. For that purpose, we go to our electric furnace, where intense heat unlocks the phosphorus in the rock. AAC was one of the pioneers in developing this method of producing pure elemental phosphorus on a large scale. Inside the furnace, terrific heat melts the rock, releasing the phosphorus, which passes off as a vapor to be caught and condensed into a liquid and piped into these steel drums with water. Thus the phosphorus, forcing out the water, does not come into contact with air, which would cause it to burst into flame. As the full drum is checked, we get our first glimpse of the newly made phosphorus. Still untamed, it would be of little use to most of us in this form. Yet here is the element without which no soil can be fertile, no food complete. After filtering and purifying, some of the phosphorus is made into cakes. Molds are filled under water, hot enough to keep the element liquid, then set aside to cool and harden. And here finally is the pure elemental phosphorus, the vital substance taken out of the rock, the stuff of life and growth. Now, let's go back to the electric furnace and see what becomes of the residue of those rock pebbles after the phosphorus is driven off. This molten rock slag, white hot flaming lava, flowing to the slag pit outside the building, might reasonably remind us of the way the world was formed in the dawn of time, or a scene from Dante's Inferno. As the slag cools, it breaks up into two separate substances. One of them, a dense crystalline material called ferrophos. Among other uses, ferrophos is added to steel to increase its ductility, or the ease with which it can be drawn out, and to give it good finish when it is drawn into wire and rolled into sheets. Now all that's left is this blue rock slag. Shoveled into still another furnace, it is melted down once more. As the molten rock streams out, jets of steam catch it and blast it into air chambers. Blown into millions of tiny fibers, it is thus converted into rock wool, used to insulate houses against the weather. Now let's return to the elemental phosphorus. It has many different industrial uses. For example, in the making of phosphor bronze alloys. In a bronze foundry, the familiar yellow cakes are wrapped, then dropped into a crucible of molten copper, where the phosphorus combines with the metal to form phosphor copper, which is alloyed with bronze to make bearings for machinery and contacts and springs for electrical apparatus. Elemental phosphorus has many other uses too, not the least of which we celebrate every time we strike a match to light up. But the pure element finds its greatest usefulness as the basis of phosphoric acid, used in making countless products ranging from medicines to soft drinks and dyes to light bulbs. The first step in making the acid is to melt the phosphorus. Still in its steel drums, it is lowered into tanks of boiling water. Then as it melts, it is pumped through pipes and purifying filters to large burners, where it combines with air to form phosphorus pentoxide. In the combustion chambers and in absorption and purifying towers, this gas is combined with water to make pure phosphoric acid, like you see in this tank, as air is bubbled through to remove the last trace of gaseous impurities. This is the purest acid, the pure food grade used in foods and medicines. The finished acid is shipped in glass-lined carboys, in barrels, and by tank cars, on its way to perform a wide variety of service in many different industries. To take a few homely illustrations, one phosphoric acid derivative is used in self-rising flour to make pancakes rise. Another is widely used in making toothpaste. And still another as a cleanser and water softener. The new and important use of phosphoric acid in livestock and dairy farming makes it possible to preserve green grasses and legumes in the silo. This saves as much as 2/3 of the minerals and vitamins which are lost when hay is dried in the field. The fresh forage is preserved in the silo with AgriPhos, AAC's pure phosphoric acid. Clean, easy, and convenient to use, AgriPhos is mixed with 3 to 5 times its volume of water and fed directly into the silage. The acid should always be fed into the bottom of the blower, but here we have arranged the fitting out in front of the cutter so you can see the clean, free-flowing acid as it runs into the freshly harvested crop. Used in this way, AgriPhos not only acts as a preservative, but adds its own valuable mineral content to the diet of the cattle, resulting in better milk, richer in minerals and vitamins. Which brings us to the most important part of our story of phosphorus, getting it back into the soil to nourish plants and in turn to feed humanity. In this AAC factory, the phosphate rock is converted into a form that is quickly available to growing plants. For this purpose, it is neither necessary nor desirable to get the element phosphorus out of the pebbles. The rock is first ground to a fine powder, then treated with sulfuric acid. This produces soluble phosphate compounds that the plant can take up and use. The resulting material, which this car is taking to the curing bins, is superphosphate, in itself a plant food having many applications, as well as the basic plant food in all complete fertilizers. Making good superphosphate is a long process, for it takes weeks for the chemical reactions to go to thorough completion, material to cure properly, so it will be in first-class physical condition. So wide is the usefulness of superphosphate that a major portion of AAC's facilities are devoted to its manufacture. Vast storage buildings are provided so that thousands upon thousands of tons may be thoroughly conditioned or cured at one time. After the thoroughly conditioned material has been remilled, it leaves the factory by barge, by boat, and by... Superphosphate supplies agriculture with its most economical form of phosphorus, as well as valuable quantities of calcium and sulfur, which are important plant foods themselves. Here it is being loaded into trucks on its way to the farms of America to go to work feeding phosphorus-hungry plants and through them mineral-hungry humanity. In our modern civilization, the farmer is the manager of the soil for all the rest of us. He must manage it well, put back what he takes away, if he is to give the millions in our cities nourishing food. Suppose for a moment that he didn't. Suppose the drain of crops, the wear and tear of the weather, had their way year after year. Here is what we might come to. This poor, miserable runt of a calf, born and brought up in an area where the soil is by nature extremely deficient in phosphorus. The sharp, protruding backbone, hollow flanks, rough coat, and prominent ribs are pitiful evidence of a dietary disease called pica, caused by an extreme deficiency of phosphorus in the animal's food. Perhaps the mother of the calf with such an animal as this gaunt creature? She, too, seems to be in the last stages of starvation. It isn't from lack of food, but because the food did not contain the necessary element, phosphorus. Driven by a hidden hunger for phosphorus, she even chews bones, instinctively trying to make up for the lack of this vital element. Yes, these are acute cases. There are some areas where such extreme deficiencies exist, but in most other areas, the soil no longer contains enough phosphorus to nourish really healthy plants and animals. Those animals we just saw had to feed exclusively on the plants grown in the local phosphorus-deficient soils. Here is corn grown in the same area. As poor and stunted as the cow and the calf, it is suffering from the same hidden hunger for phosphorus. What farmer wants to grow corn like this? How different the story when the soil is good and when it is rich in phosphorus. And how different the animals that feed on such crops, replete with health and productive of the kind of food needed to feed our people well. There is then a tie-up between the soil, the plant, the animal, and the human being. If the soil is right, so is the grass, so are the cattle, so are the meat, milk, and dairy products, and so are the people who use them for food. This relationship is real, direct, and vitally important. It even works out, believe it or not, in the case of fish. Here are conservation workers spreading superphosphate over the water. It will sink to the bottom, stimulate better underwater growth, which will furnish better food for the fish and make the fisherman happy with a bigger and better catch. But let's get back to feeding plants and look at a run-down pasture, almost ruined because it was not kept supplied with enough plant food. The whole secret of this hookup between soil, plant, and animal is an adequate diet all along the line. Find out what the soil lacks, then give one little part of this pasture an application of balanced fertilizer high in phosphorus, and see what happens. In 2 short weeks, the results are like magic, as this test square shows. The grass is up thick, strong, and healthy, long before there is any growth on the rest of the field. In another demonstration, high phosphorus fertilizer was applied in a long, narrow strip on a pasture that was making sluggish growth in the spring. Again, the results, after just 2 weeks, are startling. If the whole pasture were like the fertilized strip, it would support 3 or 4 times as many animals, and they could begin grazing much earlier in the spring. Consider for a moment the case of alfalfa. Here's a field whose soil was deficient in phosphorus to start with, and the alfalfa, seeded without fertilizer, had to get along on the residual effect of superphosphate applied under a potato crop planted 2 years before. Now you can see those old potato rows, for the alfalfa grew fairly well along the rows where there was a little something for it to feed on, and refused to grow at all where there was no residual phosphorus. An even more startling comparison is this bare patch, where the application of superphosphate missed altogether. The whole field was evenly seeded, but the alfalfa came up only where there was some phosphorus left in the soil. The rest of the seed and the rest of the land were wasted. No phosphorus, no alfalfa. Top dressing with superphosphate or a high phosphorus fertilizer is the best way to meet the needs of alfalfa to increase the quality and yield of the crop. Often cut 3 or 4 times in a single season, alfalfa is one of our most important forage crops, rich in proteins and minerals, and also in keratin, which makes vitamin A. It is to a cow something like a steak smothered in onions to a man. Proteins and vegetables all in one dish. One of the great values of phosphorus is that it has a powerful effect on root growth. Root tips are growing points, and growing points need phosphorus. These well-fed alfalfa roots go down. This business of roots brings up another point. When you look at rolling farm country, you see only the tops of the plants, but millions of roots are down there under the ground, pulling up moisture and plant foods, and adding tons of organic matter to the soil as they decay. In soil conservation, the dense roots of grasses and other cover crops are extremely important in tying down the soil. Land is left unprotected. Storms start little gullies like these. Unchecked, soon result in land like this. Gutted hillsides, millions of tons of topsoil washed away in streams and rivers to the ocean. Land wasted for lack of protective cover. That's where conservation begins. For example, this diversion ditch running along the contour of the hill to control the destructive downhill rush of water. This is how the ditch was made. A soil conservation unit of the CCC has formed the ditch, and now superphosphate is applied to give the grass a quick, strong root growth and help build a firm sod. Fertilizer is essential in projects like this, for without it, the growth of herbage would be too sparse and slow to resist the forces of erosion, and it would be impossible to build a fine, thick-rooted mat of protective grass like this. This is only one of the ways in which government agencies, schools, and colleges are constantly seeking to conserve our resources, make better use of our soil. Another is a new method of subsoil plowing, developed by men of the New Jersey State College of Agriculture, and here being demonstrated on a typical farm. Its advantage is that this simple device can be attached to any standard plow. No special equipment is required. The subsoil boot gets down the hard pan and permit free circulation of air, soil water, and plant food. Lime and superphosphate, or a complete fertilizer, are loaded into separate compartments of the divided hopper so the operator can control the rate of application of each. This new low-cost method of deep plowing allows roots and fertilizer to get down into soil unbroken by ordinary plowing, down where there are untapped subsoil minerals. The oldest method of soil conservation, practiced by farmers for literally thousands of years, is the use of manure. It is as sound today as it ever was, but nowadays we know that manure is a poor source of phosphorus, so farmers make up for this deficiency by adding superphosphate in the dairy barn gutters or on the load. That way they get much needed phosphorus back on the land, and the phosphorus enables the plants to make better use of the rest of them. Each soil and each crop, of course, has its own particular needs for fertilizers and for lime. The wise farmer supplements his own knowledge by getting his soil sampled and tested to make sure of what it needs, as this farmer is doing. There are a number of agencies that do this work. AAC servicemen alone make thousands of tests every year. Adequate sampling and testing of the soil, together with a careful study of the crop history of each field, is the only sound means of finding out just what plant foods must be supplied if the farmer is to get the most out of his soil. Here in the laboratories of the Campbell Soup Company, soil testing is put to very practical use. Technicians are testing samples of the soils which will grow next year's crop of tomato soup. Campbell's must make sure that those soils contain ample amounts of nitrogen, potash, calcium, all the plant food elements, especially phosphorus. In their greenhouses, test plants are grown in soils deficient in each plant food in turn. Planted on the same day, from the same seed, treated alike in all ways, these test plants show what happens when only one needed element is absent from the soil. The plant on the left had every needed plant food. The one in the middle, this stunted plant on the left, had oil was much too sour. This had no magnesium. This one no boron. This one shows what happens when nitrogen is absent. Here is a 100% case of potash sickness. No potash at all. And here on the right is the plant which had no phosphorus. Stunted, underdeveloped. The leaves show the symptoms of phosphorus hunger, a purplish cast which appears along the veins on the underside like the flush of fever on a human face. That plant had everything else it needed to thrive upon. Yet without phosphorus, the other elements could not function fully. Each element has its part to play in growing healthy fruit like this. And each kind of plant has its own particular needs. Take corn, for example. It takes a lot of plant food. Nitrogen is needed to give the plant a quick start and luxuriant foliage, while potash is essential for perfect pollination, which means good reproductive activity.